Hello everyone, and welcome to my YNR Official 24 channel. Phyllis Summers crossed a line so unforgivable that it shattered every bond she had left, detonated Nick Newman's last shred of trust, and forever altered the truth about Summer Newman, because what began as a desperate attempt to control the narrative spiraled into a catastrophic revelation when Phyllis, cornered by her own lies, revealed the DNA results proving that Summer's paternity was not what anyone believed, unleashing a storm of rage, heartbreak, and betrayal so violent that even Victor Newman would later admit the fallout rivaled the darkest days of the Newman family, as Phyllis, trembling yet defiant, stood in the living room clutching the sealed lab report like a weapon, her voice cracking as she confessed that she had known the truth for years and buried it to protect herself, to protect her version of motherhood, to protect the fragile illusion of a family she built on deception. And when Nick realized what she was saying, that the test confirmed Jack Abbott was Summer's biological father, not him. The air seemed to vanish from the room as his face drained of color, his breath coming in sharp, disbelieving gasps while memories crashed through his mind in brutal succession, holding Summer as a baby, teaching her to ride a bike, defending her with everything he had, believing with absolute certainty that she was his flesh and blood, only to discover that his entire life as her father had been founded on a lie orchestrated by the woman he once loved most. And Phyllis, instead of collapsing into tears, doubled down, her eyes blazing with a mixture of fear and stubborn justification as she insisted she did it for Summer, claiming she couldn't bear the thought of losing her child or watching Jack and Nick tear each other apart over paternity, arguing that she chose stability over chaos, love over biology. But her words only fueled Nick's fury as his voice rose, shaking with pain and disbelief, demanding to know how long she planned to keep the secret, how many times she looked him in the eye and lied, how many moments she stole from him under false pretenses, and when she admitted she had planned to take the truth to her grave. Something inside Nick snapped completely, because betrayal from Phyllis was not new, but this was different. This was primal. This was a theft of identity and history. And in a horrifying flash of uncontrolled rage, Nick lunged forward and grabbed Phyllis by the neck, slamming her against the wall as his hand tightened instinctively, his face inches from hers as tears streamed down his cheeks, his voice breaking as he screamed that she had destroyed him, destroyed Summer's sense of self, destroyed everything they ever stood for, and for a split second the room froze in pure terror as Phyllis gasped for air, her bravado evaporating as the reality of Nick's pain and her own recklessness collided, and it was only the sound of Summer's voice, soft, shaking, utterly broken, that shattered the moment. Because Summer had overheard everything, standing in the doorway with wide, horrified eyes as the truth slammed into her like a tidal wave, watching the man she called Dad holding her mother in a way she had never seen, realizing in an instant that her entire existence had been rewritten, and Nick released Phyllis immediately, staggering backward as shame and horror overtook him, while Phyllis collapsed to the floor coughing, finally sobbing not for herself, but for the devastation she could know. Longer control, as Summer stepped forward in a daze, her voice barely audible as she asked the one question that cut deeper than any accusation. So, who am I? And in that moment the gravity of Phyllis's betrayal truly landed, because this was no longer about rivalry or revenge or romantic obsession. It was about a daughter whose identity had been stolen by silence, as Jack Abbott arrived moments later, summoned by chaos, only to be blindsided by the revelation that the daughter he had loved from a distance was biologically his face reflecting shock, guilt, and a profound sense of loss for the years he could never reclaim, while Nick stood apart, hollow and shattered, realizing that even though DNA said otherwise, his heart would never stop seeing Summer as his child, yet knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. As Victor Newman soon entered the picture, his fury cold and lethal, declaring Phyllis a danger to everyone she touched and vowing consequences that would echo through Genoa City, while Phyllis, stripped of allies and illusions, faced the wreckage of her choices alone, whispering apologies that came far too late. Because some betrayals cannot be undone, some secrets cannot be forgiven, and some truths, once revealed, leave scars that never fade, and as the episode closed on Summer standing between Nick and Jack, two men bound to her in different ways, both wounded beyond words, the message was chillingly clear. Phyllis Summers didn't just reveal a DNA result, she detonated a family, and the aftershocks will haunt the young and the restless for generations to come. The fallout from Phyllis's devastating confession did not end with Nick's explosive loss of control or Summer's shattered sense of identity. Instead, it marked the beginning of a slow-burning catastrophe that rippled through every corner of Genoa City, because once the DNA truth was spoken aloud, it could never be contained again, and in the hours that followed the revelation, alliances fractured, old wounds reopened, and the consequences of Phyllis's betrayal grew darker by the minute. As Summer retreated into a stunned silence that terrified everyone far more than screaming ever could, her eyes vacant as she replayed every childhood memory through a new, merciless lens, questioning whether the love she received was real or conditional, whether every fight, every protection, every sacrifice Nick made was genuine or simply the result of a lie her mother engineered, while Nick, consumed by guilt over his moment of violence and drowning in grief over the life he thought he knew, sat alone at the Newman Ranch staring at photographs of Summer at every age, whispering apologies to a daughter who hadn't yet decided whether she could even look at him again, because despite knowing in his soul that biology didn't define fatherhood, he couldn't escape the agony of wondering if Summer would now see him as an imposter, a placeholder until the real truth arrived. And Jack Abbott fared no better as the weight of lost years crushed him. His joy at discovering Summer was his biological child poisoned instantly by the knowledge that he had been robbed of first steps, first words, scraped knees, bedtime stories, and countless moments that could never be reclaimed, all because Phyllis decided she alone had the right to control the truth. And as Jack confronted her later that night, his voice trembling not with rage but with heartbreak, he demanded to know how she could look him in the eye for years, share meals, share business wars, share emotional intimacy, while hiding something so fundamental. And Phyllis, utterly exposed now, could offer no justification strong enough to survive the wreckage she created, repeating that she was afraid, that she didn't want to lose Summer, that she believed Nick was the better father at the time, words that only enraged Jack further because they implied she had judged him unworthy without ever giving him the chance to prove otherwise. And meanwhile, Victor Newman wasted no time turning fury into strategy, making it abundantly clear that Phyllis's actions were not merely personal but a direct assault on the Newman legacy, vowing to ensure she paid a price so steep it would serve as a warning to anyone who dared manipulate his family again. And as whispers of legal consequences, custody implications, and public scandal began circulating, Phyllis found herself increasingly isolated, shunned by allies who once admired her resilience, now seeing only recklessness and selfishness in her choices, while Summer, unable to process her mother's explanations, finally exploded in a confrontation that left no survivors emotionally, accusing Phyllis of stealing her right to truth, of scripting her life like a novel without her consent, of deciding who she was allowed to love and how. And when Phyllis tearfully insisted that everything she did was out of love, Summer's response cut like glass as she declared that love without honesty was manipulation, not protection, leaving Phyllis sobbing in a way that felt disturbingly final, because for the first time, even she seemed to understand that no amount of remorse could undo the damage. And as the days passed, the fracture lines deepened, with Nick struggling to maintain a connection to Summer while giving her space to process, haunted by the fear that his presence might now feel like a reminder of deception, while Jack attempted awkwardly to step into a role neither of them knew how to define, torn between respecting Nick's place in Summer's life and yearning desperately to build something real with the daughter he never knew he had, creating a tense, emotionally charged triangle where every word felt dangerous, every gesture misinterpreted, and every attempt at healing threatened to reopen wounds. And at the center of it all stood Phyllis, watching the family she tried so desperately to preserve crumble because of the very secret she thought would save it, as she faced mounting consequences both personal and public, from strained professional relationships to the looming threat of lawsuits and criminal charges for falsifying records. Yet none of it compared to the unbearable realization that she may have permanently lost Summer's trust, and as Genoa City buzzed with speculation, gossip, and judgment, the true tragedy lay not in the scandal itself, but in the quiet moments of devastation no one else could see. Like Nick breaking down alone when Summer didn't return his call, or Jack standing outside Summer's door unsure whether knocking would make things better or worse, or Phyllis staring at her reflection realizing she no longer recognized the woman looking back, because in revealing Summer's DNA, she didn't just expose a biological truth, she exposed the cost of playing God with people's lives, and as the dust slowly settled it became painfully clear that while forgiveness might one day be possible, innocence never would be again. And the young and the restless entered a new era defined not by who Summer's father was, but by whether this fractured family could survive the truth that should have been told from the very beginning. Billy did something Phyllis is trying to defend herself, and Nick is keeping something to himself. Phyllis Summers is trying to defend herself. Also, Nick Newman is keeping a secret from Sharon Newman. Let's talk about Nick Newman. He found out something surprising from Adam Newman. Nick Newman learned that the Abbott family caught Matt Clark and gave him to Victor Newman. Nick Newman thought that Victor Newman must have made some kind of deal to keep his family safe. Nick Newman is still thinking about what Victor Newman did. The thing that Nick Newman found out is a deal. Nick Newman is not telling anyone what he knows, not Sharon Newman. When Adam said that Newman Enterprises was taken over before they could make a decision, Nick will do something. Nick leaves the hospital even though the doctors tell him not to. Then this man shows up. Says he is there to help save Newman Enterprises. It is weird that nobody talks about the guy who is still out there. These people should think about what's really important. Maybe Nick will send a message to Jack Abbott about what's going on with Newman Enterprises. The man could tell Jack to call the police and have them take Matt away. This would take away the power that Jack has over the situation. Nick might promise to keep Jabbo safe. Sharon Newman was not paying attention to anything until Tessa Porter came to visit her. Before that, Sharon was thinking about Nick and her son Noah Newman, and also Sienna Bacall. Then Tessa told her that Mariah Copeland is leaving the mental health clinic to take over something new. Now Sharon is worried about her child, Mariah Copeland. Sharon is paying a lot of attention to Mariah and Tessa. At the time, Nick will be helping his family keep the company safe. The young and the restless spoilers for tomorrow's episode say that Phyllis Summers will defend herself. Nick thinks he is the one who can get Phyllis to do the right thing because Phyllis is a redhead. Nick knows her very well. Nick will probably talk to Phyllis, and Phyllis will tell Nick that she did everything for their daughter Summer Newman. Summer Newman might get very angry. Call her mother Phyllis to yell at Phyllis. There is no way that Summer wants a company that was forcibly taken from her own grandparents. Sally Spectra versus Billy Abbott. As for Sally, she ends up pushing Billy for the truth. The man finally comes totally clean, but what does it mean for his relationship? At some point, Sally is going to feel less like a partner and more like Billy's mother. Nick Newman has buried so deep that even he's begun to believe it would never surface, and it all begins on a storm-soaked evening when Billy Abbott finally reaches the breaking point, standing in the shadows of crimson lights as thunder mirrors the chaos in his mind, knowing that the lies, half-truths, and reckless choices he's made have reached critical mass. Because this time, it's not just his reputation on the line, but the lives and futures of the people he loves, especially Lily, who has grown weary of Billy's constant dance between guilt and defiance. And as Billy storms into the Abbott living room where Jack and Diane are locked in a tense argument of their own, he blurts out the truth he's been choking on for months, that he was the one who leaked the information that set the corporate war in motion, that he manipulated events behind the scenes not for revenge, but out of desperation, fear, and a twisted belief that he was protecting his family, and the room goes silent as Jack's face drains of color, not from anger alone but from betrayal so deep it cuts to the bone, while Diane watches with narrowed eyes, instantly calculating how this confession could destroy everything she and Jack have worked to rebuild. Yet Billy doesn't stop there, his voice cracking as he admits that his obsession with taking down Victor Newman pushed him to cross lines he swore he never would again, dragging innocent people into his vendetta and lighting a fuse that now threatens to blow up Genoa City's most powerful families. And just when it seems the fallout can't get any worse, Phyllis Summers steps forward, unexpectedly and unapologetically, launching a fierce defense of Billy that stuns everyone in earshot, because instead of letting Billy hang himself with his own words, Phyllis reframes the narrative with razor-sharp precision, arguing that Billy is not the villain everyone wants him to be, but a deeply flawed man reacting to years of manipulation, gaslighting, and emotional trauma inflicted by the Newmans and even the Abbotts themselves. And as she speaks with fiery conviction, it becomes clear that Phyllis isn't just defending Billy, she's defending herself, her own history of being blamed, dismissed, and punished for actions others in Genoa City have committed without consequence, and her words ripple outward, reaching Lily, who begins to question whether she's been seeing only Billy's worst moments without acknowledging the pressure cooker he's been trapped in, while Jack struggles to reconcile his role as both brother and moral compass, torn between protecting the Abbott legacy and recognizing that his own rigidity may have pushed Billy further into darkness. And as Phyllis continues her impassioned stand, she drops a bombshell of her own, revealing that key evidence used to implicate Billy was manipulated, not fabricated by him but altered by forces who wanted him silenced, forces that point directly toward Newman Enterprises. And suddenly all eyes turn to Nick Newman, who has been standing quietly in the background, his jaw clenched, because Phyllis's words strike dangerously close to the truth Nick has been hiding, a secret born from a moment of weakness and loyalty to his father Victor. When Nick discovered that Victor had authorized a covert operation to sabotage Billy's deal long before Billy ever made his fatal move, and instead of exposing it, Nick buried the information, convincing himself it was for the greater good, that revealing it would only escalate the war and hurt people he loved, especially Sharon and their children. But secrets in Genoa City never stay buried, and as Phyllis locks eyes with Nick, daring him to deny what she's implying, the tension becomes unbearable, because Nick realizes that the walls are closing in and the truth he's hidden is about to detonate. And when Victor enters the room, summoned by the chaos like a dark king returning to his throne, Nick is forced to confront the reality that his silence has made him complicit in his father's schemes that have destroyed lives and poisoned relationships beyond repair, and in a moment that will echo through Genoa City for years to come, Nick finally confesses, not just to what he knows, but to how deeply he's betrayed his own moral code, admitting that he had proof of Victor's involvement and chose to protect him, believing that family loyalty outweighed justice. And the fallout is immediate and brutal as Phyllis erupts, accusing Nick of hypocrisy and moral cowardice, while Sharon watches with heartbreak etched across her face, realizing that the man she trusts has once again chosen Victor over truth, and Victor, ever the master manipulator, attempts to spin the confession into an act of filial devotion, but for once his words fall flat, because even he can see that Nick's confession has fractured something fundamental between them, and as the room fractures into shouting, tears, and stunned silence, Billy stands frozen, realizing that his confession has triggered a chain reaction far bigger than his own guilt, exposing the rot at the heart of Genoa City's power structure. And in the aftermath, alliances shift dramatically as Lily demands space from Billy, but doesn't close the door entirely. Jack vows to protect the Abbott name while privately questioning whether Victor has finally gone too far. Phyllis emerges as an unlikely moral force, her defense of Billy transforming public perception, and reminding everyone that she is at her most dangerous when she believes she's right. And Nick finds himself isolated, forced to reckon with the cost of his silence as Victor tightens his grip and prepares for retaliation, because in Genoa City, confessions are never the end of the story. They are only the opening move in a far more ruthless game. And as the episode fades out on Billy, Phyllis, and Nick standing at the crossroads of redemption and ruin, one truth becomes painfully clear. No secret stays hidden forever. No defense comes without consequences, and no confession goes unpunished in the young and the restless.